Hello, this is Friday, March 27th, following up on Pastor Tim Weissman's great reflection on Ezekiel yesterday. You can look at the playlist that this is attached to and watch all of them. I wanted to tell you a little bit about this guy, John Donne. You can see it's called Devotions Upon Emergent Occasions and the sermon called Death's Duel. Devotions Upon Emergent Occasions, John Donne wrote while he was sick with a plague that was going around England at the time. And he wrote a number of chapters. Each chapter has meditation, something he calls an expostulation, which is sort of like a plea to God, and then finally he ends with a prayer. And he wrote it while he was sick. And then what happened with him is he recovered from his illness, but only for a little while. And the doctors warned him. In fact, the last chapter in the devotion says that the disease can come back, and sure enough, it did. And then he was invited to preach a sermon at a cathedral in England. He went and preached it. The title of the sermon was Death's Duel, and then he died. So it's reading for an epidemic. And John Donne, you might know, was also a great poet, wonderful writer. And you might have heard of what I'm about to read you right now. This is from the 17th chapter in the devotions. The bell doth toll for him that thinks it doth, and through it intermit again, yet from the minute that that occasion wrought upon him, he is united to God. Who casts not up his eye to the sun when it rises? But who takes off his eye from a comet when that breaks out? Who bends not his ear to any bell which upon any occasion rings? But who can remove it from that bell which is passing a piece of himself out of this world? Here's a part you might be familiar with. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in all mankind. And therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So that's a little reflection of his. The bell he's talking about is the funeral bell, a bell ringing and warning people about death. And so he's saying, never wonder for whom that bell tolls, whether it's someone you know or don't. That bell always tolls for you because, as he points out, we're all part of humankind. He used the word mankind. I'm going to use humankind. We're all part of mankind. Every death diminishes me, just as my death diminishes humankind. And so he's pleading for this in a way of asking for social solidarity with one another, to care for one another as best we can, and to pray for one another, and to keep with one another. He says at the end, if by this consideration of another's danger, I take mine own into contemplation and so secure myself by making my recourse to God, who is our only security. He's trying to say that when we think of others' suffering, we're reminded of our own suffering. We think of others' need for God. We're reminded of our own need for God. And in a sense, all that unites us together. We all share the image of God in whom we were created. We all go to God at the end of our lives. And we're all here with God in the middle of our life and our death. I really like this idea that no man is an island. First of all, it's a metaphor that's also literally true, which is unusual and fun. But it also is reminding me of our Old Testament text that we'll hear this Sunday, which is the text from Ezekiel about the dry bones. And the dry bones, as you know, Ezekiel has a vision of a valley of bones, all scattered and desiccated in the middle of a valley. And God says to him, prophesy to these bones, and Ezekiel's kind of like, I don't know if I can, they're bones. I don't know if you'll hear me. But God says, prophesy to the breath, prophesy to the wind, tell the bones to rise. And he does. And there's two ways I've been thinking about that this week. One is the church, sort of scattered in a valley now as we're all sort of trying to maintain distance and separate and not pass our virus on to each other. But I've also been thinking about our body politic. And when I was a kid, when I was born, Ronald Reagan was elected president, and he said the 9 worst words in the English language were something like, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And so for my entire life, about 4 decades, we've done nothing but denigrate the professionalism and dedication of people in the government whose job it is to plan for things like an epidemic, to prepare ourselves, to educate themselves, and to educate us when things go wrong. And so not only do we need, and also what we're seeing now is the typical partisan split between those who believe that COVID-19 is a true epidemic and those who think it's overblown. And so we need to come together. Our body politic is scattered. And so we need to prophesy to the breath. We need to prophesy to our churches to remind them that we're bound together by love, which is beyond death, that we're bound together by the Holy Spirit and by baptism, which John Donne talks about a little bit in his devotions. But also, as people in the world, we're bound together. The virus doesn't care about borders, but we do need to come together in our country to understand how best we can mitigate the spread, and then employ best practices for containment, and finally, hopefully, over a period of a couple months, to be able to track each individual case and isolate. It's going to be really hard, and we may not be able to do it. There may be a lot more horrible days ahead. The bell tolls, and we must understand that that bell continues to toll, and it always tolls for us. But if we remind each other that the suffering of our neighbor is also my suffering, and my suffering is also the suffering of my neighbor, perhaps we can overcome these barriers of partisanship, these barriers of fear and grief, and work together to protect one another, however that may be. So God bless you this time, and I look forward to hearing our other reflections as they come. We'll get a lot more people on deck to have really great ones. And for my congregation, I'll see you Sunday as we do our Zoom service. Thanks. Bye.